all technology is going to be hyped to the point where it is an inseparable part of our everyday life, no matter whether it's tulips or OpenFlow or blockchain. Which brings us to AI. AI is the new blockchain on this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, the only podcast that dares to be both on topic and on location. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I'm a part of Tech Field Day as an event lead for all things related to networking, mobility, and security. And each episode, we bring you the perspective and thoughts of a group of experts in the IT field, Tech Field Day delegates. And we get an idea, a premise, if you will, and just kind of work with a little bit because it's a lot more fun that way. I'd like to take a moment for our guests to introduce themselves before we jump into the premise for today's episode, starting with Evan.
Thanks, Tom. My name is Evan Mintzer. I am Director of Production Infrastructure for Customers Bank. I'm located in Pennsylvania and looking forward to this conversation.
Hi, I'm Jody Lemoine. I run Tishco Networks, and I'm an independent IT consultant in the Niagara area of Canada.
So let's jump into the premise. It's an overhyped technology. It's the solution to all of your problems. We're going to find new ways to take old things and integrate it with that technology and do exciting, wonderful stuff with it. But there's a dark side. We don't know exactly what's going on. And the people who are trying to drive it, are they doing it for the good of society, or are they doing it to try to make a quick buck? And if you're asking yourself whether or not I was talking about AI or blockchain, well, that's the premise for this episode. AI is the new blockchain. All right. Stop typing, everybody, because I know you're about to leave me a hateful comment about that's not the same and blockchain isn't bad and AI is great. And the parallels between those two technologies are more than a little striking when you think about it. Blockchain is past now. Let's be honest. Nobody cares unless you're trading NFTs. You're not still trading NFTs, are you? Okay, I hope you're not still trading NFTs. But I'm going to throw this out to our experts here because, trust me, before we started recording this podcast, we were already riding this bandwagon straight off of a cliff. What is it about these technologies that make people seem to think that it is the hammer for every nail that you could possibly have?
I think that's a really good way to bring it up, Tom. And the way I see AI and it is a tool. And I think it's a wonderful tool and can be used well when used properly. The problem is you get a lot of executives, and this happens with a lot of other technologies in the past. You get a lot of people that are saying, oh, we can use AI here and here and here and here and here. And they're kind of missing it where it probably shouldn't be used everywhere.
So what you're telling me is that people spend a whole lot of money developing something, and then they want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth out of it. So they're shoehorning it into places that it probably doesn't belong. This is my shocked face.
It's like going to a buffet. You spent money going to the buffet. You got to eat and eat and eat to get your money's worth.
I'm not disagreeing with that because that absolutely is true. You feel like you have to get your money's worth out of it. So if you have one more plate of shrimp, really, what's that mean in the long run? I mean, yeah, you're probably going to get sick and all those other things, but it's worth it because you got your money's worth out
of it. Yeah, AI is something that a lot of people like to use, and as I said, it does a good job when done correctly. And I think, like a lot of technologies, you can use it correctly, but you can also use it incorrectly. And if you're trying to shoehorn it in where it doesn't belong, that's where it starts to fall apart.
And that's where the similarities between AI and blockchain come into play. Blockchain is a really interesting technology and has some very cool applications outside of non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrency. But it's a tool to a specific solution. AI is a tool to a specific solution. And at the peak of the blockchain hype, it was a tool looking for a solution. And I think AI is in the same boat now. There's a lot of places where AI is perfectly good, but it's not everywhere. And right now, everyone wants AI to be the solution to every single problem. And in doing so, sometimes they make it the problem.
Well, what is it about AI, blockchain? I mean, how far back can we go? OpenFlow, that we develop these tools and then we try to apply them to a problem. But isn't it that most successful startups find a problem that people have and then try to solve it? Like, I feel like if there's a market mismatch, like we're trying to jam that star-shaped peg into every possible hole that we could find, when in fact there is a star-shaped peg over here. So we have good allocation, because we know that AI is really good for certain things, and we are finding adjacencies every day that they're better at. I think part of the problem is, well, as at the time of this recording, at the end of May 2024, one of the things that's coming up is Microsoft just had this big new announcement that they're going to be doing Copilot Plus PCs, and they have an NPU that's doing some offloading stuff. And at first, the idea was great. I mean, they're doing the usual AI related stuff where they're like, oh, you can do image generation and image editing. And then there was the rewind feature, I think is what they're calling it, where it's like, oh, we're going to take screenshots of your PC like every 5 to 10 seconds and store them in a secure enclave, so that if you ever forget what you're doing, you can go back and jog your memory by going through your screenshots. And I don't know, maybe my grandmother thought that was a great idea, but a whole bunch of us privacy experts went, you're going to do what? No, because you're applying the wrong part of the tool to a problem that nobody has. Realistically speaking, when is the last time you sat down to your computer and went, I don't remember what I was working on 5 minutes ago. I know, I'll use this really random feature to remind myself.
I know, Tom, as we get older, that happens more and more.
We're not bringing age into this, my man. We're not talking about me getting old. We're talking about the fact that AI is trying to solve a problem that I don't have, I think.
But that's another aspect of it, the opt-out. It's like, maybe we don't want it, but we're not being given that choice. In a lot of cases, it's, hey, Facebook, the search is now Meta AI. That's what you got. Hope you like it.
Well, I mean, we're already exposing some of the problems that AI has introduced into a mature technology. Again, at the time of this recording, at the end of May, future historians, if you want to go back in the Wayback Machine and see all of the ridiculousness that AI integrated search with Google has been coming up, as someone put it, and I think it was the most apt analogy ever, it's like asking a 4-year-old to solve a problem. They're going to give you the dumbest answer possible because they don't understand anything else. Like, what was it? Pouring glue on a pizza to make the cheese look bigger or something like that. Like, yes, that is something that I would expect an untrained person to do. But the hope is, according to what everybody that I've talked to is, oh, well, it'll get better, which just sounds suspiciously like, oh, blockchain is slow, but it'll get faster.
Well, the other thing we run into on that one is that it isn't good now, but it's getting better. The problem is that we have too many people who are perfectly willing to accept what isn't very good now and not do the thinking for themselves.
I don't think for myself. I have AI to do that for me.
Exactly. Like, I'll just get it to spit out this Python code and commit it to production. Let's make this happen.
That sounds a lot like agile methodology, where you put out an MVP, minimal viable product, and then okay, we'll put it out. Just get tires on the base, and we'll get an engine later on before the car works.
So with agile methodology, you're making your mistakes and you're correcting your mistakes. It's a cyclical thing. If you're taking AI output and just grabbing it and using it, you've now created a much bigger path to fixing your mistake because you never understood the mistake in the first place.
You've got a point there, Jody. And this is one of the things that we talk about a lot with other industries that are maybe a little bit more highly regulated or maybe a little bit more intolerant of failure. It's like NASA is a really good example of this. They don't prototype stuff the way that we would prototype stuff. Like, deploy to production in NASA is, it better work every time. As a recent NASA engineer said, the next rocket we blow up will be our last rocket. They don't make those mistakes. But at the same time, when we make a mistake in development, when we make a mistake in writing or something like that, we go, oh yeah, don't do that again. AI doesn't have that kind of a memory, like, unless it's programmed to do that. And I think that maybe is one of the biggest problems that we've run into with AI, is by shoehorning it in everywhere that it doesn't belong, it's not that it's not having an effect, because everyone's hope is, oh, well, if we introduce AI and it doesn't actually make anything better, then we didn't cause any problems. So then the loss is a net zero. Except it actually is causing problems when we shove it in places, because it's making recommendations to fix things that aren't broken. Like when we tried to take a blockchain and apply it to all of these really hard problems that blockchain was ill-suited to solve. And yet everyone was like, oh, well, it can't possibly be any worse if we put it on the blockchain. It most certainly can.
Yeah, the rule is it can always be worse.
It's true.
Like they go, oh, it can't be worse. No, it can always be worse. And again, just to reiterate, I'm not saying that AI is a bad thing. I'm not saying blockchain is a bad thing. I'm saying understand the tool and apply it to the application. There's a problem to be solved, and the problem to be solved with AI is not represented by an asterisk.
I mean, I think you're right. I think that a lot of people, when they get into this, they look at something that they don't want to put the effort into solving, and they're like, well, I'll just unleash this algorithm on it because it's obviously smarter than me. No, it is as smart as we have programmed it to be. And that's one of the other problems we ran into with OpenFlow years ago. And I know I go back to some of these old technologies, and people out there are probably laughing in the comments going, oh yeah, he's talking about old stuff. I remember a time when OpenFlow was a solution to every networking problem that you had, except it was too slow, except it required way too much over engineering of the problem. In fact, today at AutoCon 2.0, Dinesh Dutt was on stage saying that, Python is the new OpenFlow, because the massive amount of re-engineering that people need to go through in order to make those kinds of things work scares the daylights out of them. And maybe that's why things like AI appeal to people so much, is because I'm not re-engineering the problem. At least I'm not. Maybe AI is rewriting everything on the back end or giving me different code or things like that, but I'm not the one who has to shift my mindset. So could it be that one of the reasons why AI is so hyped, like so many other things have been in the past, is because it reduces our uncomfortability with change?
That's definitely possible. I'm a little more cynical and think it reduces our dependency on hiring people.
It streamlines the work process, and people see that. They're saying, I need to write a document. Could go in there to ChatGPT and just ask it to write up the document, and you get a document. I find it funny when we use these third parties, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever, and there's always that little asterisk there where they say, you should be careful with the output. You should always double check the output, and how many people are actually double checking the output? I got a document out of it.
How many organizations have people who are skilled enough to check that? Like half the time you're going at AI so that you can get things that you don't have the local skills to take care of. And that's problematic.
We've already seen it happen in other industries. Probably the one that I can think of more than anything else is Sports Illustrated. Effectively, their writing staff is either left or they're running on minimal skeleton staff, and a lot of their articles are being written by AI. And you can see it's the uncanny valley problem of, you can tell there's something that's not right about this. You can't quite put your finger on it. I've seen it otherwise. People don't talk like that in movies. Like, they don't have dialogue like that. If we wrote movies the way that people talk, nobody would watch them because they sound dumb. But yet that's what we do. And I think that we're starting to see this transition in AI to, it's finding its niche, which is great. But unfortunately for people who want to invest money in AI, the niche is boring. And that's what we ran into with blockchain. Blockchain is great as a distributed, secure, immutable ledger. It is not the fix for all of the global financial sector problems. And what we're starting to see is that the companies that were betting on that, whether they were DeFi companies or what have you, are starting to collapse under the weight of their own overinflated valuations. Turns out that it's not that important. And you're not a linchpin. You're not too big to fail. But yet I flip around and I see the fact that NVIDIA is now, at least at the time of this recording, almost a $3 trillion company. Will there come a day when those same valuation resets happen to companies that are doing a massive investment in infrastructure and consuming more power than nuclear can provide for everybody?
That's a crystal ball I don't have.
Come on, prognosticate. Tell me if I'm wrong, because I know there are people in the comments that are doing the same thing right now.
Punxsutawney Phil, prognosticator of prognosticators. Okay, I'm going to leave it to Pennsylvania for that.
Sure, bring it back to me, right?
Just for a minute. I'll speak in my own time.
Yeah, no, I go back to the tool. Everything's a tool, and when used correctly, tools are great. AI is a great tool. It's just when you don't use it correctly, it becomes a problem.
Yep, I'm behind that. And NVIDIA at least has hedged their bets. Like what they're heavily investing in is raw horsepower that's necessary for AI applications. But that raw horsepower can be applied to a whole lot of different things. Coincidentally, blockchain too. So when if AI right sizes and the next big thing that requires massive horsepower comes down the pipe, NVIDIA is going to be just fine.
But we've seen this already from NVIDIA, because a lot of the technology that powers these AI clusters is actually a growth out of the HPC market. And they were able to kind of pivot quickly away from, HPC, which never got to the lofty expectations of blockchain and OpenFlow, but it was still a hype technology. It just never grew to the point where it was overhyped. And a lot of that allowed NVIDIA to kind of pick up and run where a lot of other companies were still trying to adjust. And I think we're seeing that now, where more and more competitors are starting to come online with new things like IBM and Intel, and honestly, a lot of companies that we cover on the Gestalt IT Rundown on a weekly basis. But I wonder if that kind of speaks to the fact that blockchain was already this proven solution that people were trying to associate with other things in order to get it to a point where it could be big enough to make them rich. Because I think that that's one of the things that we're starting to see that has this common thread, is you come up with a technology that has potential to be revolutionary, but what generally ends up happening is that there's a certain class of user who winds up there, whose first thought is, I'm going to be filthy stinking rich. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this the vehicle for me to get filthy stinking rich. And that kind of deflates the overall viability of it, because rather than letting the product grow into a market space where it's apt to do things, it's let's stick it everywhere we can, because one of these slot machine handle pulls is going to pay off and I can retire.
I think the answer is going to be the same thing as it was for blockchain, same thing as it was for OpenFlow. Wait for the hype to fade. The technology will either right size or fade with it, and then decide what you want to do with it.
I mean, I'm just thinking about what you said, and it sounds like a lot of startups, come up with a really good idea and then try and make as much money off it and get out, sell it to a larger company, or make the money and go.
But you're right. That is the whole purpose of a startup, is to come up with a new idea, marketize it, productize it, and ship it. If we didn't have that culture, we would be in a lot worse place than we are right now. But I think that the difference there is that if your product isn't marketized, productized, operationalized, ized, there's still value in what you built. There is value in the product, there's value in the service that you're offering. And what do we typically see in cases like that? That company gets purchased by another company. I don't see a lot of the kind of merging happening in the blockchain space. It's still way too early for AI, although we're seeing that with, OpenAI snapping up some resources from other people and Microsoft making huge investments in OpenAI. Like, blockchain didn't have these massive blockbuster consolidations. In fact, most of the time what happened was DeFi companies that went out of business because it turns out they were fraudsters, allegedly fraudsters, I have to say allegedly. They were getting snapped up for pennies on the dollar, and the assets were being converted because, well, it's that or they go out of business. I mean, I'm not saying that anybody in the AI market space is a fraudster, alleged or otherwise, but if there's not any smoke there to produce fire, what happens to these companies? Will someone take a chance on, well, it's a diamond in the rough, and hey, what's an extra $100 million? Or are we going to let these companies start going fallow by the wayside, and it kind of proves out the market that there's really only room for one or two NVIDIAs out there?
It's that whole find the hype. The hype cycle is largely a build off of that. And then what's left when it's gone? That's kind of where we come. It's going to be, we've got the AMDs and the NVIDIAs of the world, which it kind of did come down to two. You look at HPE buying Juniper. Why did they buy Juniper? They bought Juniper for Marvis. They don't care about the rest of Juniper, which Marvis was a fairly late acquisition for Juniper. That's a whole identity gone right there, all in the name of one AI technology. We're going to see a lot of that, I think. People are going to buy the AI hype. Someone else is going to want to buy them because they bought the AI hype. Whether that's going to work or not is going to depend quite a bit.
Well, I don't think we've definitively answered whether or not AI is the next bubble to burst. But of course, if you asked me 3 years ago, I couldn't have answered the same thing about blockchain. And going all the way back to the Dutch and those stupid tulip futures. The problem is not that the technology isn't progressing at an incredible pace. I am completely amazed with the capabilities that a lot of these AI platforms have developed. My problem comes in the application phase, and that's what happened with blockchain. That's what happened with OpenFlow. I mean, go back in the networking space. That's what happened with ATM Lane. And if you're old enough to remember what that is, you probably need to schedule a colonoscopy. It's more about the fact that people misapply technology to solve problems that it shouldn't be applied for because they think that it's their golden ticket. Is that an outgrowth of rampant of late stage capitalism? That's not that kind of podcast. That's for somebody else to answer. All we can say here is that you need to be cautious as you look at the way that AI is being applied. You need to ask some very intelligent questions when someone tries to tell you that their product is the best because it has AI in it. And you probably need to get better at filling out those CAPTCHAs and Turing tests, because if this turns into a bigger problem, and we are actually in the beginning stages of trying to solve Oroko's basilisk, look that up. I, for one, like to be useful to our new AI overlords. That'll just about do it for this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. I want to thank our guests for joining us. Evan, if people want to find out more about where to follow your musings and thoughts, where can they go to do that?
I'd say on Twitter, but it's now on X, at Evan Mintzer.
I'm on X at Ghost in the Net, and on Mastodon at Ghost in the Net at hackyderm.io.
All right. Well, if you want to follow the things that we do here at Tech Field Day, make sure you follow us on your favorite social media platform. We're at Tech Field Day in most places. You can also check out our website at techfieldday.com. If you want to check out the latest edition of the podcast on a weekly basis, that's techfieldday.com/podcast. Don't forget that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to us in your favorite podcatcher. No matter how you choose to consume our content, whether it's video, audio, or text, please make sure you leave us a rating and a review. We would love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love for others to hear your thoughts as well. We'll be back next week with another great episode. Until then, take care and do some AI development. You never know what you might get.